Today, we will be working through pages 381 and 382 of your practice book. You will need a pencil and your practice book open to these pages. Please pause this video until you're ready to begin. When you have those materials, press play. Yesterday, we looked at number lines, and we used number lines to help us order fractions from least to greatest and greatest to least. Today, we're going to be using number lines to help us round. Let's look at this first example here, starting with rounding to the nearest tenth. Number 1 says, what decimal tenth is marked by point A? Let's first look at this number line. And it looks like it starts with 0 and then counts by tenths. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and 10/10 is 1 whole. If I'm looking at point A, you should be writing 0 and 3/10 because the A is right on my 3/10 mark. Point B is between 2 decimal tenths. To which tenth is it nearer? If I'm looking at 5/10 and 6/10 and I zoom in to B, if I were to make it like an imaginary line that would be halfway in between, it seems to me that B is closer to 5/10. So 0 and 5/10. It says that point C is also between 2 decimal tenths. The space between the tenths has been divided into hundredths. So remember, tenths are like dimes, and I can divide a dime into pennies, which would give me hundredths. Okay? What decimal hundredths are between 8 and 9? With your pencil, let's count the hundredths between 8 and 9. Remember, when I make this first jump, I need to start with my hundredths, so my 8/10ths, or 80 hundredths, I begin to count up. 0 and 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87. 0 and 87 hundredths. Let's keep counting. 88, 89, 90. 0 and 90 hundredths is the same or is equivalent to 0 and 9/10. C is at 0 and 87 hundredths. 0 and 87 hundredths. What decimal hundredths is marked by point C? 0 and 87 hundredths. Number 5 says, to which tenth is the hundredth nearer? So I can look at that and I can say, oh, looks like it's nearer to the 9. Or I can use my rounding rhyme to help me. So I've got 0 and 87 hundredths. If I want to round to the nearest tenth, I'm going to underline the digit, look next door. If it's 5 or greater, add 1 more. So 7 is greater than 5, so my 8 becomes 9. If it's 4 or less, let it rest. Everything to the to the left stays the same. Everything to the right doesn't matter. Normally when we're rounding in the whole numbers, we would turn that to 0. But with decimals, do I need to turn that to 0? No, it doesn't add any value to my number. So I'm not going to turn that to 0. I'm just going to cross it out. Now I've proven on my number line that it's closer to 9/10, and I've also used my rounding rhyme to show that it's closer to 9/10. Let's look at this next section. It says the number line below shows 1 whole divided into hundredths. So now you've got your tenths here, so tenths. But each one of those tenths is split even further down into hundredths. So remember, if I wanted to count by hundredths, I would start at 10. I could start anywhere, actually. I could start at 0 here, and I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that would look like 0 and 1, 0, 2, all the way up to 0 and 10 hundredths. Then I could keep going. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 0 and 20 hundredths. Okay? I want you to work on 6 and 7 by yourself. Pause this video until you've completed all of the questions. Then press play to see how you did. Now that you've completed the questions, let's see how you did. It says what hundredths is marked by D. If you counted correctly, you should have started at 4 tenths, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 0 and 48 hundredths, 49, 50. So 0 and 48 hundredths. Give yourself a star if you got that correct. Then it says round this hundredths to the nearest tenths. I can see on the number line that that's very close to 5 tenths, but let's just use our quick rounding rhyme to see if we can get the right answer. Underline the digit, look next door. If it's 5 or greater, add 1 more. My 4 becomes a 5. Everything to the left stays the same. Everything to the right doesn't matter, gets eliminated. So it is closer to 5 tenths. Number 7 says, when you want to round a number that is exactly halfway between 2 rounding units, round up to the greater number. Essentially what they're saying is, well, if it's out of 5, we know that if it's 5 or greater, we go up. So what number is marked by E? You should have said 0 and 75 hundredths. That rounded to the nearest tenth is 0 and 8 tenths. If I used my rounding, I would have underlined the digit, look next door, 5 is greater, so 7 becomes an 8. You should have this entire page filled out just like I do. If you don't, you need to pause this video, rewind, and rewatch to make sure that you have all of the marks that I have on your practice book page. Once you've done that, flip the page over to 382. Now that we're at 382, things get a little more challenging, but definitely not impossible. So let's look at this number line. It says the number line shows 1/10 divided into 10 hundredths. We saw that on our last page. It says that point F is between 2 decimal hundredths. The space between these hundredths has been divided into thousandths. I want you to pause this video and answer 8 and 9 by yourself to see if you get them correct. Then press play. Now that you've given this a try by yourself, let's see how you did. First, you wanted to figure out what decimal number is marked by point F. I'm going to zoom in. They've split it into hundredths. Now I'm going to split it into thousandths. Did this trip anyone up? It gets a little more challenging. If I'm going to that first mark, so 21, how do I keep counting on from 21? Well, that becomes 0 and 211. That puts me in my thousandth spot. 0, 212, 213, 214, 215. So we're at 0 and 215. 216, 217, 218. So 0 and 218. 219, 220. Now I can see that 220 is equivalent to 22 hundredths. So 220 thousandths is the same as 22 hundredths. So if you guys got this correct, point F would have been at 0 and 218 thousandths. Now they want to know which tenth it is closer to. Let's do both of our tricks to see if we can figure that out. First, looking at our number line, I'm going to circle my tenths, 2 tenths and 3 tenths. I can tell that F is closer to 2 tenths than 3 tenths. Now let's try our rounding game. Underline the tenths because they wanted to know that's the place value. Look next door. If it's 5 or greater, add 1 more. 1 is not 5 or greater. If it's 4 or less, let it rest. So everything on the left stays the same. Everything on the right is eliminated. So we have 2 tenths. We got that on both our number line and using our rounding. If you were able to figure out those thousandths by yourself before you checked your work, great job. That was a challenging step. Let's give that a try again. Now that I've modeled it once, I've split this now into thousandths. That's like splitting a penny into 10 teeny shards of copper. Now I'd like you to give number 10 and 11 a try by yourself. It's important that you guys try these by yourself before I do them with you to make sure that you're able to independently work and figure things out. Number 10 says, what 2 hundredths is point G between? Make sure you're looking at the hundredths markers. Number 11 says, what decimal number is marked by point G? See if you can count by thousandths like I did on the first number line. Finally, it says, what is the number rounded to the nearest tenth? Pause this video and give 10 and 11 a try. Then press play to see how you did. Number 10 says, what 2 hundredths is point G between? You should have looked at the hundredth marks and seen that it's between 4 and 12 hundredths and 4 and 13 hundredths. So 4 and 12 hundredths and 4 and 13 hundredths. Now it's asking you specifically what decimal number is marked by G. Let's zoom in and see how you did. Starting with 4 and 12 hundredths might be easier if we start writing in thousandths. So 4 and 120 thousandths. Notice I'm just adding a 0 to get to my thousandths. Now I can start counting. 4 and 120, 4 and 121 thousandths, 4 and 122 thousandths, 4 and 123 thousandths, 4 and 124 thousandths, 4 and 125 thousandths, 4 and 125 thousandths. If you counted correctly, you should have said 4 and 125 thousandths. I can tell by looking at my number line that G is closer to 4 and 1/10. It's further from 4 and 2/10. Let's use our nifty little trick to see our little rhyme to see if we can also get the same number. Underline the digit, look next door. If it's 5 or greater, add 1 more. If it's 4 or less, 2 is less than 5, let it rest. So the 1 stays the same. Everything on the left is the same. Everything to the right gets eliminated. So 4 and 1/10. I'm going to do 12, 15, and 18 with you, and then I'd like you to do 13 through 20 on your own. Let's look at number 12. Using our rounding game rhyme, let's give it a try. Notice the directions say round to the nearest tenth. That means the digit that we're underlining is the 10th spot. Underline the digit, look next door. If it's 5 or greater, add 1 more. 2 is less than 5. so the 7 lets it rest. If it's helpful for you, write your number right below the number here. That way, it's very easy for you to keep everything on the left the same and eliminate everything on the right. 0 and 7/10 is my answer. Let's try number 15. Underline the digit, look next door. 3 is less than 5, so 2 stays the same. Everything to the left is copied, exactly the same. Everything to the right is eliminated. 0 and 2/10. Number 18, underline the digit, look next door. If it's 5 or greater, which it is, add 1 more. My 6 becomes a 7, decimal stays the same, 0 stays the same, 5 and 9 are eliminated. Try number 13 through 20 by yourself. Be careful. If you need to write your number down below, do it. That's a great trick for you to use. Pause this video until you're done with the next 6 questions. Then you can check back to check your work. Now that you've finished, let's see how you did. Number 13 is 0 and 4/10. Number 16 is 4 and 2/10. Number 19 is 0 and 2/10. Number 14 is 3 and 5/10. Number 17 is 5 and 2/10. And number 20 is 0 and 9/10. If you want to try the check for understanding, it says, what is 9 and 573 thousandths rounded to the nearest tenth? Underline the digit, look next door. It's 5 or greater, so my 5 becomes a 6. Everything on the left is copied, everything on the right is eliminated. My answer is 9 and 6/10. Great work today. Make sure that your practice book page looks just like mine before you get started on your homework. Please reach out if you have any questions. Starting next week, we will be preparing for our Unit 7 test. So if you're not understanding, it's important that you seek help. Thanks for listening.